I studied the writings of Reverend Albert Friedlander, and he was a great, great exponent of, interestingly, his biggest gift was from the New Testament. He was talking endlessly about love your neighbor as yourself. And and it's in the Torah, and it's in every religion. Right? The golden rule. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as others would do unto you. And the gift was so amazing to me because that idea that I was raised in was that there was one special religion, that there was one path to God. And right on our windows here it says many paths, one God. The difference is that there's not a secret club, not a secret handshake, not a secret way of praying that gets you there, but the one that works for you. So there is one that works for you, and it may take you many ways, practices, tries to find it. Finding what works for you. And I love the saying, and I'm blanking on who it is right now because I'm riffing at the moment, but my religion is kindness. Someone will tell me who said that.
Dalai Lama.
The Dalai Lama. My religion is kindness. And Rabbi Friedlander talked about it this way. He said it was really important to him that we understand that to love your neighbor as yourself, you have to love yourself. See, Rabbi Friedlander grew up in Nazi Germany. And as a little child, he heard all the horrible things that were being said about Jews and internalized them. At 8 years old one day, he sat in his bed and he made a list of all of his good qualities. He made a list of all of the things that he did well, that he did right. It's a way to push out that internalized shame and degradation. Finally, he survived. He vowed if he survived, that he would use those extraordinary qualities to build a better world. And he did that. Karen Armstrong, the religious scholar and author of a book on compassion that I've been reading, said that he was one of the kindest men she had ever met. It was sort of like, as she puts it, he was almost pathologically gentle. And that he could have done no good in the world unless he had learned at that very early age to love himself and to appreciate himself. So we're talking about compassion today. What's it like to have compassion? And I wanted to look at what the etymology of compassion is. Compassion literally means, according to Webster's, is a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress and a desire to alleviate it. So I loved that it used the word consciousness. Right? Sympathetic consciousness and a desire to relieve someone else's distress. But the etymology of the word means to suffer with, come from the Latin, and passion meaning to suffer. And when I further dove down into the etymology of the passion, it talks greatly about the passion of the Christ. The passion of the Christ is the word comes from, compassion, to suffer with. And at first, being the good ex-Catholic that I am, I took a step back from that understanding. I was like, whoa, wait, the passion of the Christ, that's not what I want to talk about with compassion, but then I thought about it for a minute. Right? What do we teach here? What does Unity teach? That the Christ isn't a person, it's not Jesus' suffering, but the suffering of all of us who are trying to lift ourselves to the higher consciousness. The consciousness of the Christ, the consciousness of oneness, the consciousness of wholeness, the consciousness of divinity. Right? So when, and you may have noticed in your life, you try and take the high road, there comes some pain sometimes with it. that people will mock you or deride you or say all manner of things against you falsely, to quote some other scripture, because you're not conforming with what the world tells us you should be. You're not paying attention, even in our own minds, to what we think will make us successful. How it is we're supposed to get along in the world, or how to be in the world in order to be successful. How we're supposed to look for competition and to be the best, and sometimes to push other people aside. Well, compassion is the exact opposite of that, right? It takes you to put someone else first, to suffer with them, meaning that you understand empathetically what they've been through, and that you're willing to walk that mile with them, to be the bridge when they're weary, when they're feeling down. There's a whole strain of metaphysical malpractice in humanity that you're not supposed to suffer, that you're not supposed to have a rough time. Has anyone experienced that? Has anyone experienced in life that you haven't been through a dark night? If you do, I really, really want to hear from you. I want to know how. My experience, and from what I know from all of you, is that we all go through it. That's what brings us here. That's what brings us together. And that's what lifts us out of it, is our common journey across all faiths, across all experiences. Sometimes suffering is the great equalizer. No matter how much money you have, no amount of position, no difference what your race is, where you were born, protects you from life and from the opportunity to go through the amazing purification process that it sometimes is. Right? So, what if we did that this week? What Reverend Rabbi, I keep doing that to him, Rabbi Freelander did. And then you went to bed tonight, sat in your bed, what if you made a list of all of your great qualities? In fact, what if we do it right now? What if you turn your bulletin over right now, in this moment, and you all have a pen, because I asked you to fill out the connection card, if not, it's right in front of you.
Thanks.
Take a moment to just sit here and go, what are my great qualities? What are my best qualities? Let me put it. He deliberately lay awake and made a list of all his good qualities, his special gifts of heart and mind. And then he enumerated them to himself one by one. Think back on your week. Think back on your life. What are the amazing things you have done? Here's the thing, right? If we're going to follow the golden rule, we better have a good feeling about ourselves. Right? If we're going to treat others as we treat ourselves, or as we want to be treated, having a right assessment of who we are, of who we really are, is chronically important. Because otherwise, we tend to treat others with the disrespect we treat ourselves. And then this vicious cycle of pain keeps getting inflicted. What are your best qualities? What makes you come alive? And what do people really see when you walk into a room? Think back onto one conscious act of kindness you committed this week. I went to a business meeting this week at Pete's. I love doing business at Pete's up the street. And so I was meeting with a gentleman who's working for us here. And we went out to have a cup of coffee, and a homeless man walks up to us and starts confronting us, wanting to sit at our table, wanting to do this. And I started talking to him, and he got quite hostile. And I stood up to talk to him, and he started yelling at me. And I said, "You can yell at me, but I'm just going to stand here and love you." And he was 6 inches taller than I, and had his Marine hat on, and I just stood there and watched him. And he eventually went away, and I sat back down and finished our meeting. And my friend and I, my colleague and I, were talking about it. Because living here in the city, as Nelson knows, and practices frequently, it's an amazing challenge and a gift to deal with our fellow man who don't have a home, who are dealing with whatever is going on with them mentally or psychologically or just humanly. And when I got up to leave and turned the corner, and he was on the ground, and he was throwing up, and he was laying on the ground, and there was all these people sitting out in front of Pete's, and this guy was sitting on the ground below us. So I walked over to him and I said, "Can I help you? Are you all right?" And he said, "Call an ambulance." And I did. I got on my phone and I called 911, talking to the 911 dispatcher, and trying to explain what's going on. And I'm answering questions, and I'm asking him questions, and he's getting more and more upset with me because I'm not getting it right. And he started cursing at me and spitting at me and standing up and started threatening me. And again, I said, "I'm just trying to help you. I'm here to love you." And he wandered off down the street. Eventually the ambulance came, but he was gone. And I was like, we never can know what we do. We never can know what we're affecting, but I just used that because I couldn't walk by. I couldn't walk by a human being laying on the street. But we all do it. At other times I have, not a saint, because I'm not Catholic. I think that's the first prerequisite. But I stood there in that moment and looked at him and wanted to do for him what I would want someone to do for me. And it wasn't that conscious at the moment. I just wanted somehow to wake up. Because it's numbing, the amount of need and homelessness here. And I watch Nelson do it weekly, and it's amazing. So in you, there is something like that. There is something that calls you to be more than you think you can be. And ultimately, I felt like I failed, right? If you judge it by the world, right? I want to have this idea that somehow what I'm doing has to make a difference in measurable terms. Is it quantifiable? Does it happen? And that's not exactly how Spirit works. Okay? The difference is that I walked away from there knowing I had done all I could. What happened is how I felt about myself, not what happened on the outside. So that I can then look at myself in the mirror. And I often talked about this when I was a drug addict. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't look at my eyes. I would avoid the glance. I would avoid my own gaze. And I certainly wouldn't look at you. I certainly wouldn't. Because my opinion of myself was so low that I couldn't get beyond it. I couldn't get beyond it to be of service to anyone else. And when I went to a 12-step program, they taught me that the way to build self-esteem is to do esteemable things. Go figure. So the way to build your self-esteem is to be esteemable. And you already are. I know you are. And I know that many of you have just written down those things. So what happens to us, in my opinion and my observation, is that in the human psyche then, We write down what we're good at. We say something that we're proud of, and all the other stuff comes up. Oh, but you didn't do this. Oh, but you didn't do that. Or that didn't make any difference. And that chattering voice of fear or self-doubt runs. And that's an old, old part of our mind, of our consciousness. The reptilian brain was formed long before our prefrontal cortex and for other areas of our brain that enable us to be altruistic. Okay? So when those things arise, when those self-doubts and fears and worries arise, don't beat yourself up about them. And say, look at them. The Buddha went away and sat under the tree. He left all of his worldly comforts, and he sat under the tree and did it over and meditated in mindful meditation over and over again till he could hold contempt for no one, fear or hostility for no one. It's a practice. It's like a muscle. And it's the same for yourself. If we're wanting to be compassionate to others, to be right-minded about ourselves, it calls on us to forgive ourselves, to meditate, to sit with the knowing that we are whole and complete, and that fear, that reptilian fear, is normal, but that you push it out with love. Push it out with concentric circles of love. Confucius used to always teach that the way to build compassion was to build it in concentric circles, starting with your family. That's how you first learn to be compassionate, is to work within your own nuclear family, learning that someone in your family, your brother, your sister, your parents, your spouse, needs something that you can give them. That you can give them, and you get to sacrifice for, and for someone else's good. And that practice of compassion within the family builds a core for you to take out into the world. And we all know about dysfunctional families in this today and age. We know, because we've dated them, all the people who come from dysfunctional families, married a few, right? And interacted with them at work. But then the only way to heal them and to heal it is to express compassion for that. To understand that someone else is acting out of fear. I was going to ask, well, what about evil in the world? What about evil in the world? Well, all evil is in the world is someone else deciding that they have no other choice but to protect themselves. That they have no other choice but to attack so they don't lose something, or attack so that they don't get hurt. And how many of us have made that choice before? Compassion is to see that choice acting out in someone else and not match it with more hostility and anger, but to match it with love. Compassion in the English definition of the word compassion is to love together. To love together. So, what if in your family, right now, imagine whatever the situation was that you grew up with, and to see the love together, even in the dysfunction, to see the love together, and if you can, to go back and heal the parts that didn't work for you, to give love together to those people that needed it so desperately, that were crying out in pain and in worry. And know what Margot sang at our opening number, that there is only love. And then to step out into your larger community and to practice it here, to practice it at work, to practice it in your other organizations you belong to create a system of compassion where you love together with another human being. So loving together as a family, as a community. And then, as Confucius likes to talk about it too, then the world, your nation, the world. Look at Yes, Tom, I'll go there again. Look at our politics. Do we love together? No. No, I can't see it anywhere. I actually have turned on the news this week, and for the first time ever, felt compassion for our president. I was like, wow, how scared are our politicians on all sides of the aisle? The name-calling, the blame, the cries for impeachment, for this, for that, for punishment, for retribution, for anger, cries for self-righteousness. Do we have compassion for the woundedness of this nation? And where does it begin? Here. Can I have compassion for myself? Can I forgive myself for thinking those things? Oh, yes. I missed the mark. I missed the mark. Buddha, again, talked about it, is to be compassionate, to live the fourfold noble path, is to live in love constantly. To live in compassion is the second part of the path. To have just compassion for all other beings. All. Animals. Humans. To love together with other people. Yeah. Was this easy? No. But if we can stop the vicious cycle of attack and counterattack, we might be able to do something. We might be able to really affect the direction of the world. We're not the first to have tried it, and we won't be the last. Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Jesus. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. believed that the highest point, and I'm going to quote this to make sure I get it right, believed the highest point of Jesus' life was the moment when he forgave his executioners. When instead of attempting to defeat evil with evil, he was able to prevail over it with good. Only goodness can drive out evil, and only love can overcome hate. Our goodness cannot drive out evil. Our goodness can drive out evil, and only love can overcome hate. Loving enemies means that we have to accept the necessity over and over again of forgiving those who inflict evil and injury upon us. Over and over again, to forgive those who inflict injury upon us. King was convinced that this was an absolute necessity for our survival and the key to the solution of all of our problems. We must not seek to defeat or humiliate the enemy, but to win his friendship and understanding. King insisted every word and deed must contribute to an understanding with the enemy and release those vast reservoirs of goodwill, which have been blocked by the impenetrable walls of hate. Impenetrable walls of hate. Now, nothing I have ever experienced in my life compares to what Dr. King went through. Nothing. Or what Gandhi and the Indians went through under British rule. And yet they found it in their heart and in their ways to forgive and to express compassion, to live from that mantra. Or Jesus standing before his executioners, refusing to condemn, refusing to attack. If compassion is a conscious, sympathetic reaction to the suffering of the world that we want to alleviate, if it is, then we can consciously make the choice for random acts of kindness, to stop in our day and know from our infinite reservoir of good that I can affect change by being kind. Not a random act of kindness, but a conscious act of kindness. To awaken from this slumber of the slumber that the pain has caused us to retreat from the world, to retreat from life, and to bury who we really are, to bury our true nature. Awaken to it, write it down, become aware of who you are, and then give it to the world. Give it freely, give it frequently, to build that muscle over and over and over again. Karen Armstrong, in the book, at one point, an analogy that really works for me, she said, a dancer learns to do a perfect pirouette by practicing it. By practicing it. Humans learn to be compassionate by practicing it in small ways, in larger ways, and in larger ways. And if we can shift from our fear into our heart space, we make a difference. I want to be part of that wave. I want to be part of that ripple of compassion that doesn't end, that pebble that doesn't stop. And I'll leave you with this. You never know what your kind word might do. You never know what your kind gesture, who it might affect. Years ago, someone said something to me that was so cracking, broke me open in the midst of my addiction, and it reminded me of who I really was. When I mentioned it in my amends to this person, they had no recollection of doing it or saying it, but I do, and I did, and it saved my life. And you never know what you do, what you say, when it's spoken in kindness instead of anger, what it can do for someone. You have that ability and that gift. And I celebrate the difference we make in the world. Let's take this to a time of meditation. And invite Deanne up and the music to come back.